Look, I don't have any footage to show you. Just roll the thing. Welcome back to the West Coast Davengers. I am your host, Dave. Normally, I don't just set out to make negative leaning videos. I don't set out to really steamroll over somebody else's joy, unless it's like some shitty influencer in the comic book space. Then I don't really care. I I went to Emerald City Comic Con this year, 2026. The first day, Thursday. I didn't film it because there was really nothing worth being filmed. Now, before I get into it, let me get out of the way that there were some great comic book creators there. I mean, names that you all know, like David Finch, Chris Claremont, Gail Simone, Wayshak Watch. Jason Aaron was there. Jim Zub was there. Brian Stelfreeze was there. Rod Reese was there. Tim Vigil, Toshio Maeda. There was a host of great names, but really, there is no point anymore for Reed Pop to call this Emerald City Comic Con. They are lying to you. They are very much lying to you. Look, I've got my Seattle gear on right now. I'm a Northwesterner now. I got coffee. I got a flannel. I got a beard. I'm bald with glasses. I'm a living, breathing stereotype. But that's not what this is about. I moved out here in 2014. So I've been out in the Northwest from New York 12 years. I have been going to Comic Cons for my entire life. This Comic Con used to be rooted in comics and illustration. The first couple years I used to go, when I still lived a couple blocks from the Washington State Convention Center, I used to go with Dave Correa. He was exhibiting there. There was tons of comics people there. There was tons of dealers. There was the, pop culture, celebrity stuff and the Funko Pops and all that. But it didn't occupy the vibe of the convention. They did the Image 25th anniversary parties at Emerald City Comic Con. Everybody was there except Jim Lee because, it's Jim Lee. Sometimes he's just busy because he's Jim Lee. So the vibe of this convention the last couple years has been up and down. The Artist Alley, I'd say you're really looking at like 35 to 40% is comic artists. The publishers there, I mean, Dark Horse was back this year, but because of the news of Mike Richardson being ousted as CEO, it was kind of like sullen, like it just, everybody was going up and like kind of wondering what's happening with Dark Horse. Boom was there. And I think Vault had a half table there, and there was a couple other small publishers. But I remember when Image used to have a giant booth at Emerald City Comic Con. Like this thing was occupying 4 corners, like a giant island, and Kirkman was there. And it was a very comics forward convention in a very comics heavy part of the country. Between Portland and Seattle, you have a big portion of the indie and major indie publishers occupying this space. Fantagraphics, Image, Dark Horse. I know there's some others that I'm forgetting, but those 3 names enough, right? That's enough to make the statement that I made. This convention really kind of disregards it. It used to have a lot more comic stores in Seattle, and there's only a couple left, but Fantagraphics being one of them, having their bookstore, and they're celebrating the 50th anniversary, kicking it off at Emerald City Comic Con. But here's the thing. They're doing a panel with Gary Groth, Jim Woodring. I forget who else is on it. Maybe one of the Hernandez brothers is on it. Why are you not having a signing? Why are you not hosting some Fantagraphics artist at Emerald City Comic Con? Like, it doesn't make any sense logically. And I know I am talking to you and I have a ton of Turok #1s on the back wall. Deal with it. When you walk into Artist Alley, what you're seeing is a couple of artist reps have their artists here. So Essential Sequential brought Art Adams and David Finch and Rod Reese and Brian Stelfreeze. They have kind of like the one row that's stacked with the greats that are there. Jim Zub is there. Jason Aaron's there. But as you walk through the Artist Alley aisles, which are way too narrow and way overcrowded, and you look at something like Heroes, and Heroes is a way to do a convention that is artist and creator forward and heavy, and you have room to walk around. And it's not like the Seattle Convention Center doesn't have space. They have 2 convention centers. No excuse there. A lot of these artists are digital artists that they're inviting to the con that are not comic creators. They have nothing to do with comics. They're just prints and trinkets and doodads, and no shade towards that. But this is supposed to be a comic book convention. and maybe you're thinking to yourself, if you're younger, you're like, what's this old guy yelling about? Let's talk about another thing that's more popular in America than American comics, manga. Was there much presence of actual manga there? No. Kinokuniya, Japanese bookstore, which is, a chain, and they have them in Japan and they have them in the States. If they had a presence at that show, I couldn't find it. I can tell you they brought one or two mangaka from Japan, and one of them is Toshio Maeda, who is the father of the Tentacle. You're missing an opportunity in a city that is very heavily populated by Asian people. Manga has always had a presence. And that kind of fandom has always had a presence in Seattle because of things like PAX and other conventions that they have. And like I said, you have the International District just blocks away from the convention center, and yet you neglect the biggest comic book industry in the world at your con. You could have had 30 manga artists at Emerald City Comic Con that you brought over from Japan, or tried to at least, and you would have had people salivating at it because we don't get it here. And I know I'm like complaining about this, but Comic Cons really need to rebrand themselves as pop culture cons, because for every one of you that may have gone to Emerald City this year, and maybe it was your first convention or your second convention and you're kind of wowed by it. When you go to something like Heroes, I've never been to Baltimore Comic Con, but I heard it's like Heroes just a little bit smaller. Or you go to IC3. This is comic books. It's just comic books. There's nothing else. The Artist Alley is kind of like, it's half-hearted. So I want to just talk about Wayshack, because, obviously I'm biased towards my friends. That's just how we are in life, right? And I went to Emerald City Comic Con to see my friends. They put John all the way back in the corner, and you walk the aisle that he's in, and it's all these like, and I have nothing against this in general. I'm just saying this is the juxtaposition. All these printmakers and cutesy artists, and almost everybody in that aisle had pink stuff. And then it's just Wayshack. And let me show you what Wayshack's art looks like. Why are you not putting this guy, one of the best artists in comics, next to a guy like Tim Vigil or by Art Adams? Like, the layout makes no sense. And having Tim Vigil across from Toshio Maeda, that makes sense to me. Having Chris Claremont across from Art Adams, that makes sense to me. But having John in a corner with a bunch of like digital print artists when he is a master of all medium, it doesn't make sense. Aside from that, it was cool that they had some booksellers there, like not comic book, but they had actual booksellers there, because they do bring in a heavy amount of authors, because this is a very literary forward part of the country. Between Seattle and Portland and other cities in between, there are hundreds of independent bookshops, or 100 independent bookshops. And in the Northwest alone, from Bellingham all the way down to, the border of California, Oregon, there's a lot of comic shops. I can't tell you the exact number, but I can say it's at least above 60. You have so many creators in the Northwest. You could make this almost a Northwestern only convention, and you would be fine. You could be like, okay, Matt Fraction, Kelly Sue DeConnick, Becky Cloonan, Mike Allred, Matt Wagner, Peter Bagg, Jim Woodring, like the list goes on and on. We're not at a loss. And then you can fly in some bigger guests that don't come here often. That's also fine. I just don't understand how this convention gets worse and worse every year. So let's talk about the comic sellers, because where the fuck are they? They're downstairs, and they're peppered throughout aisles of what I can only really describe as hot topic bullshit and stuff that has no business at a Comic-Con. And we're not even talking about Funko Pops anymore, because those are dead, just like that company pretty much. But we're talking about like just shit I don't even know what I was looking at. Ren Fair type gear. Like, there is no part of me that hates any of that stuff. But when we're in a context of comic books, it has no business there. Like, how are these people even making money at a con that costs so much to do? If you're local, it costs a little bit less. But if you're coming from anywhere else, your hotel charge, your food, all of that stuff, how are any of these digital print sellers and stuff like that making sense? And those are the people that draw that stuff. Don't even get me started on the people that just fucking use, they take somebody else's art, they put a filter over it, and they call it their prints. Come on. Yeah. And I'm also Brad Pitt, just because I call myself that. I'm Brad Pitt. The comic cellar is downstairs, and I am biased also on that because I live here. I deal with a lot of the stores here, and I see a lot of the dealers here, and I would say about 85% of them are garbage, maybe 90%. One person, I don't know their name, but they always bring some good stuff. And then there's Travis Lawrence Knott. Travis is a great comic seller all over Washington. Stand-up guy, great prices. He would think that's funny that I called him a stand-up guy because he's in a wheelchair, but he's a funny dude. Travis, I love you. I don't understand. They do not want to change. They don't want to have anything different there. They don't want to attempt to take a chance at making it more comics forward like it used to be. I just don't understand what the point of this convention is anymore. Like the actual point. Like, what's your function besides to make money hand over fist and kind of disappoint most of the people? I know that was a negative rant, but it was really nice to see friends. I am going to show off what I got. I wanted to support some people and buy some stuff. That's all. Why don't we take a look at what I got? Because at least I did pick up some stuff. I couldn't resist supporting Wayshack. This is the hot book, but he did the 1 in 10 cover for Nectar #1. And, you know, I collect John's work. That's what it is. I had him sign the copy. This was a new book that came out, Malevolent, I think this is called. Anyway, John did the cover for that. I had him sign that. I got my Cul-de-sac #1 signed, the Chromium edition, because, you know, I love Chromium. It makes me happy. But if you haven't read Cul-de-sac, it was one of the best books in the last year. I can't show off the contents of these Toshio Maeda books because they are all, well, just not for anybody's eyes that isn't ready to see what Toshio Maeda does. But I bought a couple of books from him. He signed them. And, you know, I see him in Japan the last 2 times I was there. But I want to be able to support these people when I can. Wayshack's new Myopia sketchbook. Pretty cool stuff. So Art Adams was there. I talked to Art Adams. Hopefully I'll have him on direct edition at some point this year. He seems really open to it. But I did pick up his 2025 sketchbook, which obviously came out last year. Signed on the first page with that. Look at that illustration of Godzilla. The best Godzilla artists of all time. Somebody I wanted to introduce myself to was Jason Sean Alexander. Jason is a very gifted painter and illustrator, but he also is a comic book creator. He did a big run on Spawn for years that one of Todd has talked about how like he's one of his favorite artists. So it was cool to talk to Jason. I'll be having him on the podcast at some point, but I wanted to support him by picking up his Scrooge book, which came out last year via crowdfunding, but I wanted to buy one directly from Jason and came with this print. Jason's a great dude. If you're anywhere near him at a con, go say hello to him, look at his portfolio. Like I said, very talented, also a cool dude. And lastly, I've been recently hearing about for like the last 6 months to a year, Matt Dinneman's, he's a novelist. He does a book series called Dungeon Crawler Carl, which I have not read yet, but he is a local. He's from Bremerton, Washington. So he has a new book out called Operation Bounce House. And I figured it's a good way to get in on the ground floor of his writing, and then I'll go back and read the Dungeon Crawler Carl series. But what was cool about this is he stopped by the table that was the bookseller that was selling these and grabbed one copy and signed it. And I got that copy. But excited. I've been wanting to read more books. Obviously spend a lot of my time. I spend all my reading time on comics these days, but you know, I got to change it up once in a while. Anyway, I know some of my friends had a good time because they were seeing some of these people for the first time, like David Finch, Art Adams, etc. I guess I'm a little jaded, or not jaded, but it didn't wow me because I saw most of them at OAX. I just don't understand why Emerald City Comic Con refuses to do anything that feels like a Comic Con. And that's it. I'm not here to discourage people from going, but I'm just telling you what I'm seeing as the person I am. And you've seen me go to 10, 15 conventions, whatever I've put on this channel. Tokyo, North Carolina, OAX, Raccoon City. Yes, I went to the Resident Evil Comic Con, Rose City, et cetera, et cetera. I just wanted to do this because I feel like this year I was bored to tears. I think I spent more time enjoying this rant than I did at the Comic Con. But anyway, thank you for watching. I'll be back to the regular videos next week. I got a collection to show off. Direct Edition, my podcast. Holy shit. I just had Stephen Bissett and Jim Rugg Jim Starlin. I got Ben Earl coming up. I've got Marko Djurdjevic coming up. I've got some other surprises coming up. I'm almost at my 100th episode, and my guests are booked for that 100th episode. And wait until you see who I got. You can click on over to Direct Edition Podcast. It's in the description below. Visit my website, West Coast Davengers, and you can find all the links to get subscribed on your platform that your favorite platform that you like to stream podcasts on. And lastly, I'll just say, look, I love comics. If you hit the like button, subscribe, or drop a comment down below. I'll keep talking about comics. But if you don't, I'm going to be sad. Anyway, I love comics. I read comics. I collect comics. I like to sell you comics. And I generally like to put out positive content. I just felt like today was one of those days, like Fred Durst said. Don't be Rob Liefeld.